Welcome to the Flying Octopus Podcast, offering a new perspective on Red Wings hockey, as well as all the important news from around the NHL. And now, here are your hosts, Tony Wolak, Devin Little, and Evan Sabrin.
So on Thursday, the Red Wings, they started an informal poll. Which logo should be at center ice next season? The new Centennial logo with the 100 and the winged wheel and the middle zero, or that similar logo plus Hockeytown overlaid across it like they had in the good old days. Now, when I saw that, for me, it was 1,000% Hockeytown at center ice. I felt like that's been missing since they moved to LCA, and it's a classic look. It's something they had for a long time, and where they played their best hockey in Detroit, frankly. And it is, in my opinion, part of the brand that should always be there, regardless of whether or not the Red Wings are a good team. Detroit is Hockeytown. And to me, it's a no-brainer, in my opinion. I say this because, there are obviously different opinions on the matter, and I respect everyone's opinions, but I was actually surprised by the amount of pushback against the use of Hockeytown. Like, the Red Wings shouldn't use it because the team isn't good enough, or leave it in the past, or what have you, for whatever reason for saying no. Now, for me, obviously, like 1,000% Hockeytown at center ice. That's how it should be. It should be like that moving forward. That is part of the Red Wings brand. Devin, how do you feel about this? Because as you can tell, I'm kind of passionate about the topic. As a marketing professional, talking about branding.
There's a joke in there about how graphic design is your passion, right? It's a tricky thing because I very much see both ends of the argument here, and I very much agree with you that script of Hockeytown at center ice has been missing since they moved to LCA, and I do like how you kind of you're right. They played their best hockey in franchise history, really, with Hockeytown at center ice, and even though that term has kind of been placed on the back burner in recent years, it's still there. Even when players and coaches and GMs speak to the media, it still says Hockeytown behind them. And any hockey fan in Detroit will tell you what Detroit's called. So it's a tricky thing. I think from my part, the reason why I'm so torn is I really do like that Centennial logo. I think that, obviously I'm really biased, but I think that of the Centennial logos that we've gotten, the Red Wings have the best one. And I think that just having that at center ice really, lets that shine and puts it on display for the rest of the league to see. And then Hockeytown covers it. Like, quite frankly, it just covers it up. So I'm right there with you. I see both sides. I respect both sides. I think you can make really solid arguments for both. For me, just for the sake of playing devil's advocate, I think I'll say you got to leave Hockeytown off this season, and then starting next season, you put that on and let it stay there. Let that Centennial logo shine for this season, which is their Centennial season, and then get Hockeytown back on there and keep it there for the rest of the time being.
I think that's a fair compromise. I'm sticking to my guns, but I can understand why that would be a good idea. So anyway, welcome to episode 42 of the Flying Octopus Podcast. I am your host, Tony Wolak, joined as always by my co-host, Devin Little. Our other co-host, Evan Sabrin, is in Los Angeles. He is at the draft. He is rubbing elbows with all the prospects experts and NHL media personalities and agents and what have you. So stay tuned for more content coming your way straight from the draft. Evan's there, and will be sending us all his updates from what he's hearing and seeing on the floor and around town. So today we have a big episode. It's the last episode before the 2025 NHL draft. So today we're going to kind of flip the script a little bit and do our prospect profile first. And that's because, it's on Redim Murka, by the way. Next, and the reason why we're doing the prospect profile first is we are doing a mock draft. It's going to be all 7 rounds, and wanted to get the prospect profile out of the way so you have that information, so that when we go to the mock draft and say Murka is available, you have the rationale of why or why not he might get chosen. We're also going to get into some bold predictions for the draft and then wrap up with some news and notes. So, Devin, as our resident prospect guru, tell us a little bit about Radim Mrtka and why he might be a fit in Hockeytown.
Well, I'm blushing a little bit being considered a prospect guru after our chat with Shane the other day, but this is a really interesting prospect. Redim Murka, there's a few things that stand out about him immediately. Of course, the first one is his size. He is built actually almost exactly like Simon Edvinsson, 6'6", 210. He's a righty. Edvinsson's a lefty. But honestly, as I kind of go down my list here, there's even more little things that kind of remind me of Edvinsson's prospect profile all those years ago. Murka has those physical gifts. I think that as he matures and develops more, he's going to have to learn how to use that to his advantage more. That being said, one of the things that makes him so effective is that he already does realize he has really long reach, and he's able to use that reach to maintain puck possession and disrupt plays in the defensive zone. I actually think that compared to Edvinsson in his draft season, I think that Edvinsson was maybe a bit more, his offense was a bit more potent or obvious in his draft season than Murka's is. But then on the flip side, I think Murka's defensive game is a little bit more further along at this stage than Edvinsson's was. So maybe some give and take there. There's a few things that kind of come to mind when I think about Murka's potential fit with the Red Wings at 13th overall. He has some Red Wings traits. He does compete hard. He very much screens untapped potential, and the Red Wings love to target those guys that have underrated skill and maybe need a little bit of time, but if they are developed cautiously and properly, they can really hit their ceiling. They really, specifically with defensemen, like to target that as well. And Murka, I think, very much has that. He's a mobile guy, which is great because he's huge. Typically, those guys aren't as mobile as Murka is. But I think the biggest thing for me when I think about whether or not this should be the guy the Red Wings are thinking about targeting with the 13th pick, they already have Seider. They already have Sandin Pellikka, both on the right side. Murtka is a righty. And we've talked about Jackson Smith. We've talked about Keishon Atchison. They're lefties, and how targeting them and potentially drafting them pretty much completes the defense because you have Edvinsson and maybe Smith, maybe Atchison, and then you have Seider and Sandin Pellikka. Murtka doesn't necessarily do that because he's also a righty. Now, having said that, there's always the possibility that someone can play off their offhand side. I don't think that's the preference and what you should necessarily aim for. But if at the end of the day, Murka's who they call, they can make it work. But I guess depending on who else is available at 13th overall, despite the talent, and honestly, I keep bringing it back to Edvinsson. Edvinsson was a really good prospect back in 2021. And obviously today we see that that potential really was there. I could see Murka having a very similar development path and being a very similar player. But I just don't know that he addresses the needs that they need this pick to address. I think that if, like I said, depending on who else is on the board, it'd be tempting to take Murka, and I wouldn't blame them for taking him. You can't have too many really high-end right-handed defensemen, I don't think. Those are typically at a premium at some point in their career. But I find myself thinking, there's other players that I think I would lean towards if I was on the clock and Murka was there.
Now, Shane said something interesting in our last episode, and if you didn't get a chance to listen to it, highly recommend it. Shane Molloy he's an expert when it comes to prospects, and someone who we've had a lot of respect for a long time. And it's great to have him on the podcast. And he mentioned how Murka came over to the WHL halfway through the season. He picked up English very fast. He picked up the new system very fast. He is a very malleable prospect, someone who picks up things and learns things very, very quickly. Um, Now, not saying that the other top prospects in the Red Wings range can't do that, but may not to the same extent as Murtka. Do you think that could potentially give him a leg up if he's available at 13?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of reasons why, despite my apprehension, they should still consider this prospect. And that's one of them. I mentioned how maybe you end up having to move someone over on their offhand side. I mean, maybe that's what Murka does. If he learns quickly, maybe that's what you kind of hand to him is figure out how you can survive playing on your offhand side. And if you can do it, then they still completed their defense. Maybe not the way you thought they would, but um, yeah, I that is another trait too that maybe gets overlooked, especially when it comes to these players that are coming from overseas. It's an adjustment. I know it not only is playing, professional hockey and all that a big adjustment, but just coming over to a whole new country and learning the language, learning a different style of hockey, learning a different lifestyle, really. Learning how to find your way around town, learning where the good places to eat are, learning um, you know, avoid that part of town. There's a lot you have to learn, and if a player already shows the ability to just catch on quickly, that's invaluable. That you can't put a price on that, because you already know that even if you kind of go into this prospect knowing it's going to take time to get him where you want him to be, you know that it's if he doesn't get there, it won't be because he can't wrap his head around these concepts. It's just because it wasn't meant to be.
Yeah. My money is he's gone before he gets to the Red Wings. Either Buffalo or Anaheim takes him, but we'll see what happens, I guess.
I would agree with that.
All right. So now we're going to move on to our mock draft. And what Devin and I are going to do is kind of run down the first 12 picks as they were simulated on Puckpedia here. And then we'll debate who the Red Wings are going to take at number 13. So first, New York Islanders select Matthew Schaefer. The San Jose Sharks selected Michael Misa. No surprise there. The Chicago Blackhawks at number 3 took Anton Frondell. At number 4, the Utah Mammoth selected James Hagan. Number 5, Nashville selected Porter Martone. At 6, Philadelphia selected Roger McQueen. At 7, Boston selected Victor Eklund. At 8, the Seattle Kraken selected Caleb Denoyer. 9, the Buffalo Sabres selected Jackson Smith. 10, the Anaheim Ducks selected Redim Murka. And then Pittsburgh in 11 and 12, back-to-back, went with Carter Bear and Lyndon Lakovic. So, where does that leave the Red Wings? Well, Brady Martin's available. Jake O'Brien's available. And Keishon Atchison is available. Now, I feel like, Devin, going into this, you and I thought Keishon Atchison would be available. Maybe Victor Eklund, maybe Carter Bear. Players we've been talking about. But Brady Martin and Jake O'Brien, those are some quality players. So I'll toss it to you first to throw out your take on this.
Well, my mind immediately goes back to our conversation with Shane and how he described certain players that are available kind of around this range. He said there's only a few predators in this draft, and I tend to agree with the assessment that the Red Wings could use some predators in their lineup. I'm not talking the ones from Nashville. I think that, like you said, Tony, Brady Martin was not expected to be available at this pick. I'd actually be really surprised if, come the draft, the Red Wings are on the clock at 13 and this player is available. I'd actually be very, very surprised about it. We can make some good arguments for the 3 players we've discussed here. I think they all deserve some consideration here. And I actually kind of feel bad that I'm kind of shortchanging 2 of them because we should talk about them more in depth. But I feel like the opportunity to pick up Brady Martin here is honestly, you can't pass that up. I think he fills a lot of needs that this team has. He's a really physicality is kind of the name of his game, but don't get me wrong as well. As much as he plays hard, he is soft on the puck. He makes plays. If you're looking for a guy that could potentially be the Red Wings, Sam Bennett, Matthew Tkachuk, whatever that type of player, if Brady Martin's on the board still when the Red Wings are picking at 13, I don't think you're going to find anyone better.
Now, I'm leaning forward to nothing against Keishon Atchison and rounding out your top four, but I think the most pressing need the Red Wings have right now is just more offense, more high quality players in their top six. And for me, and looking at our draft board, we have Jake O'Brien first. Brady Martin's not first. Jake O'Brien, in my opinion, has the higher ceiling. He's an outstanding playmaker and someone who, you can visualize just thriving with Michael Brown-Zegnigaard on one wing and maybe Marco Kasper on the other, or Lucas Raymond on the other, or what have you. He is that good of a playmaker where he can be a driver for the Red Wings. Now, I completely understand your logic for Brady Martin. It's a quantity that the Red Wings do not have. I don't see him having first line potential, though. That's the thing. I think his ceiling is a little limited. What you're going to get, and it's going to be a really good hockey player, but more of a middle six player. He's going to be a game changer for the locker room and for the franchise and for how he carries himself and pushes the team. You have to measure is the impact of him. It's not just his individual contributions, but how he can elevate the team as a whole versus Jake O'Brien's individual contributions and how his playmaking can open up and create more for Brown-Zegnigaard, for Raymond, for Kasper, for whoever's on their line. So to me, I'm leaning O'Brien. It's closer than I expected it to be, but I'm leaning O'Brien just because he is a truly elite playmaker, and they're going to be seeing more goals, and he can create that space for others to score those goals, and even chips them in himself.
And let me get this out of the way too. I very much was pounding that, Brady Martin. I was not expecting that player to be available, or not exactly expecting Jake O'Brien to be available at that spot either. So these are two players that, again, if this is actually happening when Steve Eisenman and Chris Draper are doing this is a great spot to be in, honestly. And for what it's worth too, going back to our very first prospect profile on this show, the first one we did was Jake O'Brien. And I very much remember saying that he has those Red Wings traits. And I honestly thought that he might be connected to the Red Wings a bit more. Unfortunately, the Red Wings are just, or at least it seems like they're just a little bit out of range to where it doesn't seem like he'll fall in their lap. But here we are. I think one underrated thing, too, that O'Brien maybe potentially allows them to do down the road. He's a center. He's a playmaker. Eventually, Dylan Larkin's not going to be the Red Wings' top line center. And in fact, I think at some point you want to start planning on moving him to the wing. I think that if you have Marco Kasper, you have Nate Danielson, you have Jake O'Brien. I would even say if you have Brady Martin, to a lesser extent, but he could be a part of that solution too. You have a solid center core that then allows you to move Larkin to the wing and kind of prolong how productive he is, at least kind of how his high end production. I think in order to maintain that, you're going to have to move him to the wing eventually. So obviously kind of thinking a few years out from draft day right now, but if you end up picking Jake O'Brien, we talk about how picking a left-handed defenseman kind of completes the defense. You pick Jake O'Brien, you've completed your center core more likely than not.
I mean, we have consensus here.
Send in the pick.
Send in the pick. All right. Selecting Jake O'Brien with the 13th overall pick somehow. So, wow. And sneak peek, this does tie to my bold prediction for later on. So more to come there. All right, now we're going to move on to the second round here. So we've simulated the remainder of the first round and the first half of the second round, and now the Red Wings are up again at number 44. So the top players available based on our board are Henry Brustowitz, Alexander Zhuravsky, William Horkoff, and Simon Wang. Now, I kind of think the Red Wings should draft a defenseman here, but also Horkoff and Zhuravsky, like, things are falling Detroit's way here, and that's a good thing. So, Devin, do you have a preference on position here? Because you're getting a talented player regardless.
For sure. And I'm right there with you. I kind of mentally I was kind of thinking if you're taking a forward in the first round, you should take a defenseman in the second round, or vice versa. But sometimes the board shakes out in a certain way where you just gotta sometimes you gotta throw your plan out the window and just kind of work with what you have in front of you. And this is a situation where I guess we're gonna have to wait to pick a defenseman here because there's too many forwards here that are well worth the consideration here. I think we have to start with the assistant general manager's kid, William Horkoff. Last name probably sounds familiar, right? This is a player that I kind of expect to go in the latter half of the first round, maybe early second. This is another one where I just feel like he's if this falls this way come draft day, that's crazy. He's one of those, and I also think he's got some Red Wings traits too, in the sense that he's got untapped potential, kind of like how I was talking previously about Murka. The physical traits are all there. He's 6'4", he's a string bean for sure at 180, but you get him to train with professional strength trainers and all, as you will throughout his development. He's going to be a big dude. He's probably going to be maybe even 6'5", 200, 210. That's a big boy. That's going to be real hard to play against too. I think that he also, it's not just the physical things that he's going to be hard to play against. He's got some good soft skill too. He knows what to do with the puck when it's on his stick. He likes to score. He likes to shoot the puck. He likes to make plays. I think that this is, I mean, again, if this was a real situation and where Eisenman, where Draper and Sean Horkoff is right there, I'd have a hard time looking him in the face and saying, I'm not taking your kid. I'll throw out one other one just because I do really like this prospect. I do really like Alexander Zhuravsky. I think he's another one of those guys that he's going to take a little time to develop, and a lot of those Russian forward prospects typically do. You got to give them their time to play over there, work the way up through the ranks, get settled in the KHL. We're seeing that with Dmitry Pechelnikov right now. And then if all goes well, I mean, Zhuravsky could very well be a Pechelnikov-esque player where dude just makes plays and scores goals and has high-end skill. I think that you can't have enough skill in your prospect pool, and I think that Zhuravsky would up their skill level. All of that being said, I'm a huge Zhuravsky fan, but William Horkoff should not be available at this pick, and he's not going to make it to the next one. I think he's got to be the pick here.
I was hoping that William Horkoff would be available for the Red Wings, just because, not because his dad is in the front office, but I think he has potential. He enrolled in the University of Michigan early and didn't look out of place as the 17-year-old. So there's certainly appeal there, and Zhuravsky as well, just because of his offensive ceiling. Then you look at someone like Simon Wang, who at 6'6", 215, doesn't turn 18 for another month here. Someone who has untapped potential. He fits in with how the Red Wings are constructing their defensive core. Him and Edmondson on the left side, insider as well. That's three monsters you're playing against.
Oh,
He's going to take time to develop, but I do think he could turn into a real player for the Red Wings. Now, there's obviously risk in that, whereas like Jurovsky and Horkoff, they are a little bit more easily projected into the middle six, more likely. So for me, it's close. But I think the smart play here is to go for what is safer. You can easily project into an NHL role. That's Horkoff. So, Devin, if that's okay with you, I think that might be the pick.
I think so too. I think the Red Wings have been pretty eager to kind of take shots and maybe gamble, or not necessarily gamble, but really take a chance on players in the second round. Since Eisenman took over in 2019, they've been willing to bet on talent, even if there's kind of a long runway there. I think that with the way the board shapes up right now, this is an opportunity to make the safe pick, but it's not like you're taking a low ceiling player. You're taking a player that very well could be an everyday NHLer for a decade plus and be a really solid middle six forward. I'm right with you. I think this has got to be the pick.
And one last thing about Horkoff, he is the best available player on our draft board. So, well, we're following what we said we'd do, Devin. So that works out. So now we're going to move on to the third round, and the Red Wings have two picks back to back at number 75 and number 76. Now, the four best available players remaining, according to our draft board, are Philip Ekberg, a smaller winger, originally from Sweden, but played for the Ottawa 67s last season. Thomas Polton, a forward from Czechia who played in the Finnish league, and a high motor, high impact, Red Wing style of player, plays on the wing. Peyton Kettles, a massive 6'5.5" defenseman, plays on the right side for Swift Current of the WHL. Another mauler, good defensive defenseman, and Malte Voss, another mauler, left defenseman though, played out of Sweden, and one of the best hitters in this year's draft class. So, Devin, we've selected two forwards so far, two high quality forwards. What are you thinking for 75 and 76 here?
Well, I'm definitely thinking a defenseman with one of them, at least one of them. And I think I'm going to make an argument for one of them right now. I have my eyes on Peyton Kettles, and there's two reasons why. One, as I just mentioned, I think it's time to add a defenseman to the draft class. Two, doesn't hurt to add another right-handed defenseman. Outside of Axel Sending Pellikka and Anton Johansson, the prospect pool is a little shallow on the right side on the blue line. I think Kettles would address that. And as we've discussed a few different times and in different ways, the Red Wings need to kind of evolve into a team that is very difficult to play against. And a way to become difficult to play against is to have a lot of physicality. And I think that Peyton Kettles is somebody that kind of checks all those boxes for you. In the third round, I mean, at this point in the draft, you're starting to just kind of, it's the old cliche. You're starting to just throw darts, and you're kind of hoping that you get something. I think that Kettles, when you look at him, he more than likely is not going to be a top pairing guy, a middle pairing guy, or even a middle pairing guy. He's probably going to be a bottom pairing guy, but you're not drafting him to be your savior on the right-handed side. You don't even need him to be because you have Sider and Sending Pelika. You just need someone to add a different flavor to the mix, and I think Kettles does that for them. And then with the other pick, since we'll talk about going back to back here, this is where I can be persuaded to where maybe it's time to go back to back with two defensemen after going back to back with two forwards. But I do have a forward I can't help but keep looking at, and it's Philip Ekberg. I think that he reminds me a lot of some of the other players. There's honestly like three of them that kind of come to mind in the Red Wings prospect pool. So just like I'm saying, Kettles, you need to add him because he diversifies the pool. Ekberg just kind of fits in. He has a lot of skills that other guys in the pool have, but at this point, you're trying to accumulate bets that you're hoping one of them pays off. I think Ekberg could be that. He's a very exciting player. He plays fast. He is very competitive. We all know Detroit loves those types of players. He has potential to be a really solid top nine forward, be a scoring forward. I don't know that his physicality is going to be something that he's ever known for. But if he's playing his game, that doesn't necessarily have to be part of there. His game's about playing in the offensive zone. So you want the puck on the stick, not him chasing people down. So I like the opportunity to add a big right-handed defenseman that diversifies the prospect pool in Kettles, and then to kind of just continue to add skill and offense and just kind of raw potential in Ekberg with these two picks back to back.
So I'm actually in agreement on Peyton Kettles. He was my top choice for the four players that we mentioned here, and he is the top or the best available player according to our draft board. And sticking with that, the next best available player is Thomas Polton, and I like him over Ekberg just because of the projectability.
Sure.
Now, with Ekberg, he is kind of a known quantity. This is like the Red Wings already have a handful of mid-level offensive, forwards that'll fit somewhere in the third line, maybe a skilled fourth liner, maybe a tweener. You got Amadeus Lombardi, you got Jesse Kiskinen, you got Max Plot. Pachelnikov, we all have high hopes, but could end up falling down to a third liner. There's Jonathan Berggren if he's still around in a few years. Because there is a surplus there, I'm looking at Polton as someone who I would feel really good about as a fourth line grinder. Like there is a clear roster spot and role for him. He's already a big dude for 18 at 6'1", 200. We keep coming back to it. The Red Wings want to be harder to play against, and he is someone who's hard to play against. He wins battles. He plays physical. He plays fast. He's a good penalty killer, and he's a great leader too. He captained Czechia at the last U18 Worlds. So that's where I'm leaning, just because of the projectability there and the value he can play in a bottom six role as like that physical, fast, grinding player, as opposed to like, we'll see how he kind of fits in as a skilled player who's not good enough to be in the top six.
Sure. Yeah. And for what it's worth too, there's one there's a quality in players that I always place a premium on, because it's either you have it or you don't have it, and it's leadership. And Polton has that. You mentioned he captained Czechia's international team. I think that does speak volumes to who he is as a player, both on the ice and in the locker room. If he ends up being a middle six power forward, great. He'll take on that role with gusto and he'll perform well. If he ends up just being a fourth line grinder type of guy that can chip in here and there, I bet he takes that role on happily as well too. That's what leaders do, and I think that you do make a good point that there's maybe a bit more flexibility in terms of his pathways, how he could end up in the NHL. And maybe at this point in the draft, even though they're all dart throws, if you can get something that feels a little bit more certain, for lack of better words, that it could be an actual player, you got to get behind that. At the end of the day, you want as many players out of a draft class as you can. I'm not opposed to taking gambles or placing bets on players at this point in the draft, but I follow what you're saying, and I honestly agree with it. I think that you're going to get a player of some magnitude with Pelletin, whether he's a really, 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 really good AHLer or just a really solid NHLer, or maybe even a really, really good NHLer. Who knows? But there's enough intangibles there for me to get behind that as the pick.
All right, so we simulated the rounds 4 through 7 just for the sake of time here, since we are running a little long. And just to recap where we ended at the end of the draft, number 13, the Red Wings selected Jake O'Brien. Number 44, they selected William Horkoff. Number 75, Peyton Kettles. 76, Thomas Pelletin. At 119, selected forward Jimmy Lombardi from the Flint Firebirds, who will be playing there for one more season before moving to the University of Michigan. At number 40, out of Czechia, selected David Roosevelt, a forward. And then his teammate, Thomas Galvis, at 172, a defenseman. Goaltender Jack Parsons at 204, out of the Chicago Steel, the USHL. And lastly, at 211, Felix Farhammer, a defenseman, played at the J20 National League in Sweden this past season. So overall, pretty good balance between forward and defenseman by the end of it. High quality players. Devin, any last thoughts on this year's draft class?
Solid class. I think that it's honestly a really good mix of players that theoretically one day will make you harder to play against, as well as upping their skill level. I think that if you can somehow build or put together a draft class that does that, you got to feel pretty good about it.
So next up, we have our bold predictions for this year's 2025 draft. Evan's there, so we'll see if they come to fruition. He can tell us first. But Devin, what is your one bold prediction for this year's draft?
My one bold prediction for this draft, I don't know if it's super bold, but just like a few years ago when the Red Wings made a trade on the draft floor to acquire Ville Husso, I think that the Red Wings will make a trade to address their goaltending situation at the draft. And I think it'll be a more substantial ad than Ville Husso was. A lot of names floating around there on who they could possibly be targeting, but maybe we'll talk about that some other time. But I think the Red Wings are going to get themselves a goalie on the draft floor.
Love to hear it. For me, bold prediction is the Red Wings trade into the top 10 of the draft. Now, they've been rebuilding for quite some time, and they're close. They've been on the fringe of a playoff berth for the last 2 years, but naturally, if this team's going to take a step, they're going to be selecting the second half of the draft. And to bolster their system, to position themselves well for the future, selecting the second half of the draft moving forward, it's going to be harder and harder to select those cornerstone pieces, those game breakers, those players that play in the top half of the lineup. So, with this being, in my opinion, the last year of the rebuild, I think they consolidate picks, consolidate prospects, do whatever they can to move up into the top 10 of the draft. Maybe it's number 10, trading with the Ducks. Maybe it's number 7, trading with the Bruins. Maybe how they get Jake O'Brien after all. We'll see. But if they end up getting a player like James Higgins or Roger McQueen or Porter Martone or Jake O'Brien or even Brady Martin, like that player will complete their rebuild and they will be better off for it. So you have two bold predictions, a new goalie and trading into the top 10. So we will see Friday night or Saturday if those take place. And now moving on to the news and notes, just to wrap up the show here. First up, the Red Wings re-signed defenseman Antti Tuomisto. He signed his qualifying offer that comes with a cap hit next year of $813,750. It's a two-way deal, so he'll make less than that in the AHL. Devin, what do you see out of Tuomisto this year, and do you think he still has a chance to crack the NHL lineup someday?
Sure, I think he's definitely still has a chance. It's kind of crazy to think about how long this guy's been in the system. He was the Red Wings picked Sider in the first round of the 2019 draft. Tuomisto was their pick in the second round, or at least their first pick in the second round of that draft. That's it's been a while that Tuomisto's been in this draft class, or Albert Johansson was in the same draft class, and he's now in the NHL. So. What I saw from Tuomisto this year, I would say I saw a lot of what I saw last season. Last season, he played a lot on the Griffins' top pairing, honestly, and he looked competent doing it. Probably his best gift is his big booming shot. When he is able to use it, he's someone you have to account for if you're the opposition. But where he's really made strides over the last few years is just on the defensive side of the puck, where he plays defense. Go figure. He's not just somebody who's trying to score goals. He's someone who's trying to prevent them, and he's becoming better and better that over time. The big thing for me is I think at this point he's probably a bottom pairing guy, and I might even say he's like a 6th or 7th defenseman. I'm happy to be proven wrong about that. I don't know that I will be proven wrong about that if he stays in the Red Wings system, to be honest with you. This is a big year for Tuomisto for a lot of reasons. It's his last year where he doesn't have to pass through waivers. So starting, in 2026, 27, that's something to think about. So if he's going to kind of announce himself as someone who's ready for the NHL, it's got to be this season. And for what it's worth, this past season with the Griffins, as great as his previous season was, this was kind of a plateau year for him. I don't think he necessarily regressed, but I didn't see a lot of progress there. So if I can see some progress in 25, 26, he may very well become that bottom pairing defenseman I'm describing.
They'll certainly have competition with Axel Sandin-Pellikka and Anton Johansson there as well, on the right side for the Griffins. Other news and notes, also early Thursday morning, the Buffalo Sabres traded forward J.J. Peterka to the Utah Mammoth for defenseman Michael Kesselring and forward Josh Doan. Peterka was my top trade target for the Red Wings. Surprising to see the return, but when you look at what the Sabres need, especially on the right side of their blue line, that kind of makes sense. But boy, when you see names like Jordan Kyrou and Noah Dobson and a couple of first-round picks thrown in there as other options that were considered, you have to wonder if the Sabres took the best offer. But better for the Red Wings, I suppose. And then lastly, the NHL and the NHL Players Association, they are close on a new CBA. It has been reported widely that among the changes for this next CBA, the league is expected to move to an 84-game schedule with 4 preseason games. They last did this in 1992-93. So it's been a little while since the league played more than 82 games in a season. Contract term limits are going to decrease by 1 year. So the max a team can re-sign their own players will be 7 years, and the max teams can sign unrestricted free agents from other teams is 6 years. The World Cup of Hockey will be back in 2028. There will also be a playoff salary cap, so no more Florida Panthers or Vegas Golden Knights running a team out there with $15 million worth of cap hits above the upper limit. Teams will have a permanent e-bug instead of pulling someone out of the stands, quote unquote. But a player who travels with the team isn't part of the organization from a depth chart perspective, but he is their go-to e-bug. Draft pick rights will be held until the players are 22, regardless of which league they are drafted out of. So in the past, if you're drafted out of major juniors, your rights are held for 2 years and you can re-enter the draft. If you are drafted out of, a North American junior league or overseas, your rights are held longer than that. Like if you go play college, it can be until you're a senior after your senior season. So you may not be 22, you could be 25 by that point. But moving forward with players being able to move freely from major juniors to college or vice versa, it'll be a consistent 22 across the board. Finally, no dress code. Players can show off their personality a little bit more. So that is it for this week's episode of the Flying Octopus podcast. As a reminder, next week is 4th of July. And we will all be traveling. So no episode on Thursday, but instead we're going to record on Tuesday night after the first day of free agency and have that drop Wednesday morning. So next week's episode will be coming out on Wednesday morning instead of Friday morning. Devin, anything else before we close out today?
I'm very excited to see how teams like the Golden Knights and Panthers and Lightning navigate a playoff salary cap. But we'll dive more into that when the new CBA kicks in.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Flying Octopus podcast. Follow us on YouTube at the Flying Octopus channel and Twitter at Flying Octopod.